Thank you, Kathy, for reading this text so beautifully. So beautifully. I was just thinking about this. It's not part of my script at all, but I'm pretty sure, and someone can fact check me, Jesus, in the whole of the Gospels, only calls someone a fool 5 times. Twice it's towards the Pharisees. I'm sure someone is going to tell me that I'm wrong when I'm done here. But I'm pretty sure twice it's towards the Pharisees, twice towards the disciples after his death, I think, and just one time about someone that we don't know about. Just one time about this rich man that's in here. I don't know how you think through parables, but in my mind, parables exist on this sort of chart list thing. Like, they're all great parables, all right? Don't get me wrong. But if they were songs, some of them will make it to the top 20 Billboard list. And others won't quite make it there, all right? Is that sacrilegious? Borderline. But that's how they exist in my mind. I have a list. And I'm sure some of you do too, just secretly. For instance, for me, the 5, no one's asking, but I'm sharing this, right? 5 top. 5 top have to be, okay, I won't give you my 5 top, because that would be sharing too much, exposing my hand here. But the ones about the kingdom of heaven are in the top ones, right? Do you remember the parable of the hidden treasure? That has to be top 5. The kingdom of heaven just happening to someone. They didn't work for it. They weren't even looking for it. They stumbled upon it. But once they did, it was whoa, I just need to have this. I want more of this. That for me is just And I'm sure you guys have your own as well. I don't know. But, yeah, when I think about this one that we just read today, I have a feeling no one has that on the top 5. And it's not a bad thing. It really isn't, because even the gospel writers don't have it in the top 5. In fact, Luke's the only one that has this story in the Gospels. There's another gospel that the Gospel of Thomas. Most of you haven't heard of it because that gospel didn't make it to the top 5, to top 4, right? But that is the only other place where that parable exists. It's Luke kind of, Luke was trying to make it cool, high school, no high school students here, but you know how some people try to make things cool and they'll try it once or twice or 3 times? That's how I feel when I'm reading this. It's Luke is trying to make something important that maybe a lot of us are not thinking enough. It isn't one of those awe-inspiring stories like the mustard seed. Do you remember that one? Something so little can have such a big impact. How things grow beautifully without our involvement in it. That's awe-inspiring. You hear that, you're ooh, I want to be part of this. And it's not even as shocking as the oxymoron, the Good Samaritan, right? Which really should be the good, bad person, right? That's how they view the Samaritan. And so it's not even there's not even a kind of exciting, ooh, oh, he went there kind of thing. It's just, it doesn't even have a good ending. Do you see how it ends? It ends with the main character being called a fool. If anything, I think it's a bit of a downer. I have a friend, and all of us have that friend. I have a friend who, I love him, but he's every time there's something that I want to invite him to, I've got to think again whether I really want to invite him. There's going to be a social gathering. He's the friend that cannot keep it light. Do you know that friend? If you don't, it's probably you. You're that friend. But he's the kind of person that you can never have any sort of easy conversations with. You can't just ask a question for the sake of banter, for the sake of having a conversation, right? Like, you got to be like, it's so annoying to have him at the table when you're having dinner, because someone will say something that's kind of half funny, half true, and he's like, well, actually, from a philosophical perspective, and it's like, dude, we're at dinner. Like, no one is taking this seriously. You know, there's no, you can't even joke about something because it's gonna make you feel bad about it. That's him, and I feel like that's the energy I get from this parable. It is one of those parables that holds a mirror into the deeper parts of our soul, and that's uncomfortable. And it's the kind of stories that sometimes I when I hear it, I'm just like, dude, like, Jesus, like, keep it light. You know, just like, it's a bit of a downer. Luke tells us that a man comes to Jesus to settle a dispute with his brother. It's one of those old inheritance disputes that we're very, very familiar with, you know, haggling over furniture, dishes, silverware, house, land, savings account, etc. And he wants Jesus to be the referee. And he goes, Master, tell my brother to give me my share. And what he wants is a direct answer. Just tell my brother he's being a bit of an idiot. He's being a meanie. Half of that should be mine. Tell him to give him my share. But Jesus is like, no, I'm not going to get involved here. I'm not a referee. Who made me a referee? He's like, you know what? I'll give you something even better. I'll give you a parable. I'll hold a mirror to you so that you can see really what your life is about. And so he tells him this parable of the rich man. And it's a simple story. You just heard it. A rich man flush with unexpected success who finds himself with a problem. His problem is that he does not have enough room for all of his stuff. And so he says, I got an idea. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones so I can fit all of my stuff in it. And so he does that, and with everything safely stored, he dreams of relaxing, eating, drinking, and being merry. But apparently, in Jesus' story, these things are not part of his future. He doesn't get to relax. He doesn't get to eat and drink and be merry because Jesus says, you fool, this very night your life is being demanded of you. And then Jesus turns to our brother and says, this is how it will be for whoever stores up things of themselves but is not rich toward God. I told you, downer. Don't invite Jesus at a table, bro. Do you remember the show Holders? It's a show about people who live with a type of pathological need to store up and collect stuff. Do you remember that? The show makers will come into their house with psychologists, organizers, and cleaning specialists and spend 2 or 3 days decluttering the space and doing therapy on the person so they can start on a healthier path. Do you remember that show? Was I the only bored one? No, you remember that show, right? That's the vibe I get when I'm hearing this story. Which is another reason why it's a boring story. It's a story about a holder. I think often when we think about this text, when I think about this parable, we think that Jesus is having a go at wealthy people. It's one of those Lucan stories about blessed are the poor and not so blessed are the rich. That's the temptation, isn't it? Let's be honest. Especially in our time. And I'm not saying that this isn't a nuanced thing, right? I think there are serious questions that this story or these stories found in Luke about the ethics of building wealth for both our society, and the individuals. But that is not quite what the stories are about. Because the Bible is never as simple or dualistic as poor good and rich bad, or rich good and poor bad. No matter how much we try to do it, it is never as simple and dualistic as that. And the Bible argues with itself with this. In the Bible, wealth is at the same time beautiful and ugly. Just look at the book of Psalms. 1 minute the psalmist is like, oh, God is blessing this person with all the wealth. And the next minute they're like, oh, the wicked will prosper and have all the wealth. And you're like, wait, which one is it? That's what we want. Which one is it, Jesus? Tell us. It's beautiful. It's ugly. And there's a tension there. And it is always more than a conversation about good and bad. Think about our church. One of the most beautiful and meaningful things we do together every Saturday concerns money. Our deacons come with baskets, and we have beautiful music. We call it the offertory, right? And we give. We give whatever we can, whatever we feel called to give, and we do so without any expectations. No strings attached. Isn't that beautiful? We say to God, hey, God, this is our gift. Use it where it's needed. You don't need to tell us what you're doing with this, God. Give it to people we know, give it to people we don't know. This is our gift. Use it where it's needed. Isn't that beautiful? Isn't that one of the most beautiful things that we can imagine of doing in a time and a world measured by what do I get in return? No, when we come here and we give money, we say, God, and we look at each other and say, hey, brother, sister, friend, this is my gift. No strings attached. It's beautiful. And so as we read this text, we have to be careful not to be tempted to kind of have some sort of caricature idea of what God is trying to say about wealth. Especially in the context of this parable, I really believe that there's something deeper here than mere judgment about what happens to the rich man. I think Jesus isn't just drawing attention to possession, but I think what he's doing, and Rebecca and I talk about this often, Pastor Rebecca talk about this often, we talk about, it's never really just about the thing, it's about our relationship to the thing. And I think that's what Jesus is drawing attention to here. It's about the relationship that we have with our possession. And if it was a question, I think God would say, Jesus would say, there was a rich man, and a question that I have for that rich man is, what is your relationship to the things you own? What is your obsession with storing more and storing more? Or maybe, tell me, what's your fear? What do you think is going to happen that you're so focused on this thing? You know what strikes me what strikes me about the show hoarders is how much of what the hoarders hoard and what they store, how much of these items that most people would consider as not useful or not valuable. Have you noticed that? It's always a bunch of junk mail, old catalogs, newspapers, things that might make crafts and make gifts one day. Maybe someday it will be useful. Right now, no. Have you noticed that? And it's a question of like where you put the value and how you conceptualize what you value. Why is it hard to get rid of a bunch of old newspapers? And so the concern for everyone who's trying to help them, the psychologist, is like, hey, we're not going to talk about the stuff that you hoard. We're going to think about, hey, why does this thing matter to you? The homes are so cluttered that, have you noticed this? There's a lot of things to notice today. It's always a bunch of stuff on the table. It's always, I've got this beautiful bed, but I can't sleep in it because I've got a ton of stuff in it. Like I've seen one where the kitchen is like full of stuff. You can't cook. The person's eating out of a microwave and they have like a kitchen. Right? I watched one years ago that stuck with my mind where the lady kept saying, I want to invite my family over, and I will. I want to invite my family over. And the thing that got her to call those people in was because she wanted to invite her family over. But she couldn't because she couldn't cook. And even if she ordered in, there was no table to sit at the table. There's not even enough space for her family. And so she kept saying, like, I want for people to, for her family to come over, but she cannot. And I want to be careful here because I'm not making a judgment against people who suffer from actual compulsive and pathological issues, right? But I think it's an appropriate analogy for what Jesus is getting at in his parables in regard to how we relate to the stuff of our lives. You know, our English translation does not actually do justice to this text. I nerded out this week. I brought out my Greek book, my Greek Bible. I haven't done that in a while. It didn't help, and so I had to go on Google. I can't remember the Greek, guys. I'm sorry. I was just like, I'm pro person. I think I know it now. But so I went on Google. I went on Google instead, Blue Letter Bible, and it's fascinating. It's fascinating because especially in the Aramaic, I'm told by Google, Jesus actually paints a picture of a man completely disconnected from people, from God, and from land in his obsession with storing away his stuff. Where we say, in the story it says, a man, the land of this rich man, in the Aramaic it's like, the land produced a ton of stuff without the rich man, but even the rich man is qualified as a rich man who's alone. No family, no descendants. The closest story will be, here's a story about a rich, isolated person, disconnected from people, from God, and from the land. No connection. In his preoccupation with possession. And his preoccupation with his possession became the thief of the connectivity that is important for his well-being. He's isolated, no friends, no community, just a closed loop. In fact, and this we can see this in our English translation, he's talking to himself. I counted. He mentions I or me 11 times in this short story. He's talking to himself. I don't think this is a story where God is having a go at having things. I think that Jesus is making a point that this man's obsession was blinding him to what really matters. His relationship to stuff moved him away from the very things that would make him whole: connection and relationship. I think it was Ambrose, 4th century, I think, that said it so aptly: the rich man didn't need a bigger barn. If he'd only looked around at his neighbors, he would have found ample storage for his grain. But he can't look around for his storage because he has no one around him. He can't look to his neighbors or people who are hungry because he's not around anyone. He's not connected. And so he just has stuff. And one day he wakes up and is like, dude, I have way too much stuff. And he can't even think creatively about what to do with that. It's like, the best he can do is, let's build a bigger barn for my stuff. And so Jesus says, hey, you're a fool. Not because you're rich, Not because you have stuff, but because of your relationship to the stuff. Your preoccupation with your possession has disconnected you from God, from others, and from the sacred economy of grace, which is always experienced in connectivity. The tragedy here isn't that the man has a lot of stuff, it's that the stuff has a lot of this man. And Jesus says, this very night, your life is being demanded of you. Can I do one last bit of Greek? I work for this. I'm entitled. I'm allowed. You know the Greek word that's translated as being demanded in this text can be literally translated, and I think should be literally translated as they are demanding. Jesus says, you fool, tonight the grains and goods you have stored up are demanding your life from you. It's not God that's coming to get your life. It's not some sort of other adversary. It's not the poor people that's coming to come and get your stuff and your life. It's your stuff that's demanding more of your life. But this is a parable. We don't know how Jesus intended it. We're just grasping at the mystery here. And so don't take what I'm saying to the letter. It's food for thought. But I think if there is any wisdom that we can definitely take from this parable this morning, it's this, that whatever we store up eventually makes serious demands on our lives. You cannot store and be detached from what you store. The opposite of this is the more people you store around you, the more demands people will make from you. But also the more life people will give to you. Because you cannot store up enough friends and it not becoming part of who you are. And it's the same, the less friends you store in your life, the less connection you make with people, the less life things and connectivity you're going to get. And the more stuff you hoard, the more that stuff will demand from you. And it doesn't matter what kind of stuff it is, right? It could be, grains. Do you remember during COVID, people panicked and they were like, let's go buy up everything at the store. Right? I think that's a parable for that kind of living also, right? It doesn't matter what it is. It could be toilet paper, but it could also be anger, grudges, resentment, guilt, regrets, pride, arrogance. It could be the idea of not being enough. We can store that up. It could be negative comments that people say to us when we were kids. We can store that up. You could really store that up your whole life. And trust me, that kind of thing has what's the interest on that? It builds interest. Like negative things that you're told when you're a child, if you don't let go of that, it will catch up to you. It will demand a ton from your life. It could be power, money, possession, the need for control, success, reputation, a church full of people, an obsession with winning, obsession with proving them wrong. I'll show them. All of these little things that we're so subtly obsessed with, they make demands on our lives. And so maybe it's time again for us to start taking note of our stuff. And so I'll leave you with two questions to think about. One, what stuff do you like to store up in your barn or barns? And two, does the stuff you store up in your barn own you, or do you own that stuff? And a good way to gauge this is this. That's the secret sauce. Came to me this morning on my drive here. A good way to gauge where you're at with your stuff is to look at your stuff and whether that stuff connects you to more people, connects you more to God, and connects you more to this world. Does the stuff I like to collect bring me into a deeper relationship with this world? Does it bring me in a deeper relationship with Christ, the author of my desires? 2 questions. What stuff do you store up? And does that stuff own you, or do you own that stuff? We began with a parable, so I'm going to end with a parable, just to confuse you all a little bit more. This one isn't one of Jesus' parable. It's a parable from Fred Craddock, one of my most favorite storytellers. Top 5. This is the parable he tells. I have never been to the greyhound races, but I've seen them on television. They have these beautiful dogs. I say beautiful, they're really ugly dogs. And they run that mechanical rabbit around the ring. When the dogs get to the point that they can no longer race, do you know what they do? The owner puts up a little ad in the paper to see if anyone wants to adopt one for a pet. And if no one takes them, the dogs are destroyed. I have a niece in Arizona who cannot stand the thought of those dogs being destroyed. So she goes out and adopts them. She has several of these big old greyhound dogs in her house. She loves them. Once I was home where they adopted a racing dog. He was a big spotted greyhound, and he was lying there in the den. One of the kids in the family, just a toddler, was pulling on its tail, and a little older kid had his head over on that big old dog's stomach, using it for a pillow. The dog just seemed happy, so happy. And so I say to the dog, "You still racing?" No, the dog said, "I don't race anymore." I said, "Do you miss the glitter and the excitement of the track?" "No," he replied. "Well, what was the matter? Did you get too old to race?" No, I still had some race in me." "Well, what then? Why did you not win?" "Oh, I won over $1 million for my owner." "Then what is it? Bad treatment?" No, the dog replied. "They treated us royally when we were racing." "So you got crippled?" "No." "Then why?" "Why?" I pressed. He said, "I quit." I said, "You quit?" He said, "Yes, I quit." "Why did you quit?" "Well, I discovered that what I was chasing was not really a rabbit, and so I quit." He looked at me and he said, "All that chasing, all that running around, running, and what was I chasing? It wasn't even real." The dog put his head back down so that he could be a better pillow for the little boy. You know, we're all pursuing things in our lives. Sometimes we're more aware of what we're pursuing, and other times we don't really know. We're doing it, we're pursuing it, but we don't know what it is. One thing I'm learning at this stage of my life, which I thank God for, is this little moment of revelation that I'll share with you. You will never get enough of what you really don't want. You will never get enough of what you don't really want. And I think that's something to think about, isn't it?